Hey everyone, welcome to Kempner Canucks. My name is RevTrev, and I'm so glad you're here because today we have a special guest. I've been telling you for days now that we have a special guest, and Canucks fans, we are pumped about the draft. There's nowhere but up from here to go. So we're dying for some draft content, and today I wanted to dive into Carson Carels and have some really what I would call eyewitness events for this. And so this is the Canucks draft special. If you haven't hit my other stuff, check it out. It's on the playlist on YouTube and all the different areas we post on. But I want to introduce you, Jeremy, who I am a big fan of. I've watched a ton of your stuff, and I just want to say welcome to the channel.
First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be on your channel. I've been watching you for a long time as well. The Canucks content across BC, the content creators are excellent. So it's great to come across everybody's platforms, work together, produce some great content. So RevTrev, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. My privilege. Yeah, I was sitting there thinking, like, I'm making up all this content. And I'm going, wait a dang minute here. If there's somebody that knows this guy, because I keep thinking about him and I'm like going, what if the Canucks trade back? What if, and maybe there's someone they want instead, but yeah. I'm trying to think of every scenario. So let's dive into the content. We'll get into the guy that you watch all the time. But before we do that, I want you to plug your stuff. Plug it now so people can see you. And I'd love for them to see your stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trev. Yeah, JCorgi across all the social media platforms. Most importantly, big on TikTok. We have grown to over 11,000 followers on TikTok. It's been a grind, as you know, RevTrev, but I love it. It's the best. So really growing on TikTok and then branching out to the other platforms. So JCorgi across everywhere. You can toss me a follow. We look forward to seeing you on that side of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I highly recommend all of his content. Okay. Let's get into the man of the hour. He's going to be drafted high. What do you think? Well, okay, let's talk about him. Tell me from your, you see him every game.
Yeah.
What is it about him that's special? He didn't really play at this level last year. He has just risen, and he's risen on the draft board. So I'd love to hear your take on him.
Yeah, so Carson Carels was a high draft pick of the Prince George Cougars, selected in the first round of the Bantam draft. He played his rookie season last year with the Prince George Cougars. He played a lot of minutes, to be honest with you. While the numbers weren't there, essentially, he was logging top 4 minutes, playing on the power play as a 16-year-old in the Western Hockey League, which you don't see too often. But that exposure, that experience in his first year, you see him now moving into his sophomore year. And it's been incredible to watch from the beginning of the season at training camp, the Ham Hughes Brewer game that they have, the inter-squad game to close out training camp, from there to now where we're at the end of the WHL season. It's amazing how in one calendar year, how much this player has grown. At the beginning of the season, I know a lot of us were talking about how much he had proved just in the offseason. The most notable jump has been his play since being on the World Junior team at Christmas time, because he came back and he looks like an entirely different player, but in an amazing way. His game has jumped, at least 3 levels. And you can tell that playing at that level and at that tournament, he understands now just how talented and how good he is, because his confidence has been through the roof the last couple of months. And that's why the Cougars have made a really good push here towards the end of the WHL regular season. It's truly impressive what he is doing as a 17-year-old. I know there's many times watching him, I have to remind myself that he is 17 years old because he plays a very mature game. He's up and down the ice. He's very responsible in his own end. He's very physical. He's 6'2", 195 pounds, room to grow. He has a great first pass. Even offensively, he has a good shot that nobody really talks about, a very heavy slap shot, finds a way to get his wrist shot through. And even if you go back, I highly recommend, if you really want to see a Carson Carels highlight that really stands out, he had an overtime winner against the Kelowna Rockets at the end of January, early February. I highly recommend Googling it because he completely undressed the goaltender for the Kelowna Rockets on a breakaway, which was pretty incredible as a defenseman. But the one thing I see with Carson Carels, and I saw some of the draft specialists on Sportsnet and TSN talking about it, Craig Button. The interesting thing with him is he's just kind of good at everything, which is good. You know, a lot of these prospects, they tend to have some sort of weakness, something that they really need to work on. With Carson, it's a little different. He's very well balanced. He skates well. He reads the defensive zone well. He kind of knows when to pinch into the rush with his line mates, and that's why he's got 20 goals this year as a 17-year-old in the Western Hockey League as a defenseman. It's pretty unheard of. So he's very well-rounded in his game, and it makes it even more impressive, especially as a 17-year-old when you're still trying to find your footing in the Western Hockey League, especially in just your second full season. And he's taken on a full leadership role, and he's been a huge asset for the Cougars this season.
Yeah, and like I keep hearing all those things, and it's trying to find information on players has been difficult. I think for the top 20, pretty easy to find. Then after that, it's difficult. So we'll get into some more Prince George Cougars in a second. But Carels is just seems to be that guy that everyone's kind of talking about a lot of his skill sets. One thing, though, that everyone talks about when it comes to a draft person or a prospect, I should say, is they always kind of talk about their skating. What would you say about his skating level at this time?
I think it's very good. I think when he got into the Western Hockey League last year, I think that was one of the things that helped him early on while he got his footing kind of set, getting used to a new league. Because quite frankly, making that jump to the Western Hockey League, especially as a 16-year-old, is massive. So his skating really helped him early on. And quite frankly, it's just gotten better and better. His skating, he can be a one-man breakout if he needs to be. But more times than not, he's making that first pass. But he has that in his back pocket that, you know, if he needs to break it out himself, he can. We've seen time and time again this year. He has the capability to do those end-to-end rushes, just like, you know, former captain Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar. But he's not that type of defenseman, if that makes sense. He has that skating ability. He pinches up into the rush lots. He activates, you know, he's always got the green light from head coach Mark Lamb. And the big thing is he always gets back. He's always getting back to, you know, cover any odd man rush or anything like that. So his skating is definitely not something to worry about, especially as a draft prospect.
That's great to hear. What about his physicality? Because as we can see here, he's not like a 200-pound kid, but he's got the height. He's 6'1", 175 pounds. I mean, like you just said, he's only 17 years old. And if you know one thing about any kind of guy, they're going to fill out eventually.
Yeah.
And even 175 is still a good size. But what about his physicality? Can you tell us about that?
He does not shy away from the physicality. I think the big thing I can say right now about Carson Carels when it comes to the physical play and what you need to know about him is he's a farm boy. And farm boys do not shy away from the physicality. And even as a 17-year-old, he will definitely muck it up in the corners for sure when it comes to his physicality. He does not shy away from it. He'll throw the open ice hit if it's there. He's always hard in the corners. I think that's an area where, you know, he welcomes it. And especially in those heated games, that's one thing actually I'm really excited to, you know, next weekend, the Western Hockey League playoffs begin. That's going to be something to watch with Carson. And if he plays his game and the Cougars play their game, they can go on a bit of a playoff run, and that's huge for Carson and his potential draft stock. But that's where he's going to be able to show off his physicality even more so come playoff time.
Yeah, and as you can see here, the numbers don't lie. I mean, we're talking unbelievable numbers. As a defenseman, guys, I don't know what else you'd want in a player, but look at that, 219 shots on goal alone, 3-game winners already, 73 points. I'm really excited to watch him play in the playoffs. Like, now that I've been scouting all these guys and watching and trying my best to gather information, I'm looking at these players and I'm going, and looking at the standings. Maybe that's what I should throw up here is the standings, because it is tight. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely tight. If you look at this, I will just go to the Western Conference. So you got Everett, that's got 115 points. They look fantastic. Only 8 losses this season. But then Penticton V's, which have made the jump to the WHL, and look how good they've been. But Prince George and Penticton are right there with 43 wins. Kelowna's right behind them with 38. And then, of course, you can never count out Kamloops, but Spokane's up there as well. It is going to be interesting. What are your thoughts about this season, about the Prince George Cougars, and what you think their potential is going into the playoffs?
So I would say, actually, at the beginning of the year, I thought, and I think a lot of people in Prince George thought when it comes to this Cougars team, that they were good enough to be a playoff team, but they didn't think, we kind of thought that they'd be right around kind of like that 5, 6, 7 range when it came to being a playoff team this year. They lost a lot of offense last year when it came to, they lost their captain, Riley Height, a 2nd-round draft pick of the Minnesota Wild, who was a 5-year Prince George Cougar. They also lost Cohen Zemer, a 20-year-old forward who was a 3rd-round pick of the Los Angeles Kings, who was also a 5-year Cougar. And then they also lost 20-year-old forward Borja Vallis, who played in the top 6 with the Cougars, and he was excellent last year as a 20-year-old. So I think at the beginning of the year, a lot of people wondered where the goal scoring was going to come from. And we thought they'd win a lot of hockey games this year, 2-1, 3-2. And we have seen a lot of games like that this year for sure. But when you have a player like Carson Carels, who obviously he can kind of lead the charge both offensively and defensively. He's the quarterback on the power play. The Cougars are clicking on the power play at about just over 31% this year, which has been 1st or 2nd in the Western Hockey League the entire season. And then it also helps when you have San Jose Sharks 1st-round draft pick from last year, Josh Ravensburg, in between the pipes, who is the best goaltender in the Western Hockey League. And, with a good goalie, especially come playoff time, you can go on a run. You can definitely go on a run. And last night they secured the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. They'll play either Spokane or Kamloops in the 1st round of the playoffs. And no matter who they play, I think it's going to be a hard-fought series. Spokane has been pesky, but the Cougars have had their number this year. And Kamloops and Prince George, the season series was 8-1 in favor of Prince George. But with that being said, it felt like every game was a 1-goal hockey game. So no matter who they play in the 1st round, I think it's going to be a tight series. And I think you look at the Western Conference in the Western Hockey League, it's going to be interesting to see what plays out. Because I think, like you mentioned, Trev, like Everett has been, from the beginning to the end, they've been the top team in the Western Hockey League, especially in the Western Conference. I think there's an argument for some teams out east, but when it comes to the Western Conference, they're going to be a very difficult team to beat, especially in a 7-game series, because like you mentioned, they've only had 8 regulation losses all year. And one of them was last night to last place Wenatchee. So
wow,
that's how wild the Western Hockey League is. Anybody can beat anybody on any given night, and you just kind of never know what happens.
Yeah, and with Everett, there's a lot of hype over this one kid. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but DuPont is the guy that everyone is talking about. So you've definitely seen him live. Is he noticeably better than most players that come into that you get to see, or?
I mean, it's extremely impressive to see how good he is at 16 years old.
Right.
I think, I've seen players definitely with that skating ability in the Western Hockey League before, but they've been 19 and they've been in the league for 4 years, and they were a first or a second round draft pick of a National Hockey League team at 17. What he's doing as a 16-year-old is remarkable.
Right.
There was a reason why he got exceptional status. His skating is unbelievable. His shot, I think, is second to none. Yeah, and I also even think I know there's a lot of talk when it comes to his offensive game, but I do think his defensive game is a little underrated as well. Like he's a very good hockey player, and there's a reason why he's being hyped up for next year. There's
Yeah.
100% a reason, and what I'm excited for with him is if he stays in the Western Hockey League next year. I'm curious what kind of numbers he ends up producing, because especially as a defenseman, because I'd have to look up what the record is when it comes to draft eligible defensemen and it comes to points in a season. But we're talking about a player that might be able to set some records next year in the Western Hockey League.
And that is wild when you think about it. It's like, really?
Yeah.
So I've made this this graphic that I've been showing everyone. Like this, it's like it's going to take some time, like to rebuild this franchise, and so this might be another one of those guys that we're going to be talking a lot about next year. But I'm really excited to talk about these guys. Do you think that Carels is going to be a top 10 pick?
Yes. Yeah. I think, when you look at the top 10 of this first round, I think there's, I think the first 4 guys you look at, they're going to be McKenna, not in this order. I'm just going to preface this now. McKenna, Stenberg, Verhoeff, Reed. Like, I think those 4 are going to be in that top 4. I think after that, that's where it gets interesting. I think it'll depend on what ends up happening when it comes to the draft order.
Yeah.
And it comes to, teams' needs and everything like that. But personally, I think Carson Carels is going to get picked anywhere from 5 to 8. I think that's kind of that range where I see him getting picked. I think when it comes to defensive prospects that are on the board right now, I think Verhoeff and Chase Reed, I think, have a little bit more offensive upside than Carson Carels. Like, I think Keaton Verhoeff, especially at 6'4", 220, his offensive skill set, like that's hard to pass up. And they're very different defensemen.
Right.
I think Verhoeff can be a number 1 defenseman offensively, kind of similar to Makar and Hughes, whereas Carels, I don't know if he's ever going to be a number 1 defenseman on an NHL team, but I think he'd be a great top pairing player with a number 1 defenseman because he's so responsible in his own end. So I really do think it's going to depend on what the draft order plays out come May 5th when the draft lottery gets held, because that's where it's going to be interesting when it comes to kind of just figuring out where some players go. But like for me, I think Carels he's definitely a top 10 pick. I think he'll be in between 5 and 8.
Yeah, and so the question I had for you was, could he be considered as a number 1 D-man? But I mean, there's a lot of talent, of talent that's happening there. So yeah, I'm with you. But in saying that, sometimes guys like him get a little chip on their shoulder and say, I'm going to prove the world wrong. And don't tell me I can't do this and can't do that. So there are always steals in the draft. And so there are players that we don't have picks for that I'm sitting there going, oh, I wonder where they're going to go. And please, Lord, may it not be Calgary. May it not be Edmonton, because you're just sitting there and some of these young players I think are going to be super skilled. But yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm really high on Reed as well, but I like a lot of the prospects that when it comes to the defensive side. It's pretty exciting this year. maybe it's just because I know a little bit more. I hate it when the Canucks don't have a first pick. It just makes the draft just stink,
Yeah.
And so I find my interest level drops. But now, hey, we got a lot of picks. We got 2. So
yeah, we got lots to watch for.
Yeah,
especially
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we have lots to watch for this year. Obviously, since the Canucks have been where they've been this year. I've been looking at draft prospects. It feels like since beginning of December this year. So June can't come soon enough to be prepped and ready for the draft.
And I believe May 5th is now scheduled for the draft lottery. So that's exciting. It's all going to be filmed live. It's not going to be filmed in some back room somewhere. So I'm excited about that.
Maybe that means then some of Canucks social media and Twitter can stop saying that it's a conspiracy then.
Oh, I don't think it's ever going to end with the Bettman stuff because, I mean, it's been since 1993 since the Canadian teams won the Stanley Cup. Yep. So I get it, but I don't know. I just think it takes a lot of work to rig it. But anyways, now everyone's going to flood my DMs and go, oh my gosh,
my bad.
How can you believe that it's not rigged? It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, there's enough conspiracy theories to actually believe in. Never mind that one. Okay. Okay, so I want to ask you, because you have your boots on the ground there in Prince George, watching the Cougars every game. What other Prince George Cougar players should be drafted this season? And the Canucks do have other draft picks. And are there some players there that maybe the Canucks would consider possibly landing in that second round, third round, some of those later rounds? And we got a bunch of picks. So,
yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to a Cougars perspective, there are some players that have definitely been on Central Scouting that I think are going to be later round draft picks, like anywhere from the 4th round to the 7th round, that kind of range. Like these are the type of players. The thing is, I'll say this, I think there was 4 or 5 of them aside from Carls that were named to NHL Central Scouting. And once you get to a point towards the end of NHL Central Scouting and where they're ranked, you never know if a player is actually going to get picked or not. Players that get ranked all the time don't end up getting picked. With that being said, I think one player that's definitely going to get picked, maybe around the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. It really depends on the team, how many draft picks they have. But a player like Caden Lemire on the Prince George Cougars is a really interesting prospect to me. He's 6'4", I think 215. He's a big boy from Edmonton. Has a lot of size, is a winger, plays very physical. Right now, I'd say his offensive upside right now isn't there, but that's probably primarily because he's, for the most part, been on the 3rd line with the Cougars this season. However, there's a very good hockey player there. He's definitely a project. I think he's definitely a project that if you draft him, you can definitely develop into a pretty solid, potentially, 3rd line player. We've seen, especially the last few years, when you watch the NHL draft, and maybe it's the Florida effect of how they've won the Stanley Cup the last 2 years, playing big, playing mean. And, Caden Lemire, he's big. He plays mean. And while he might not have, the sexiest of numbers, that's a player that I think, you see it at his age and his size, and you're probably going to take a flyer on to potentially, make as a draft pick and see if your development team can work into a very good player here. So that's one that I would definitely keep an eye out for when it comes to the Prince George Cougars. Another player that is in his 1st year as a Cougar, he was selected in the import draft this past season, and that was Dmitry Yakutsanak. He's a Russian forward, very skilled. He's perfect in the shootout this year for the Prince George Cougars, which has been a lot of fun. He actually scored a shootout winner Friday nights against the Victoria Royals and on Tuesday night at home against the Kamloops Blazers. He has a lot of skill, he's a very fun player to watch. Average size, about 6'1", 180 pounds. I think this year he has 25 goals, 25 assists, which is pretty good for his 1st year in the Western Hockey League. Totally. With that being said, I mentioned earlier, the Cougars lost a lot of offense this past offseason. So I think that helped bringing a player like him in with his skill set. He's been in the top 6 all year, and he's gotten a lot of opportunity. He's been a bit streaky, I'll say that, when it comes to his offensive numbers. However, he's a very skilled hockey player, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody picked him, in the later rounds just because of that offensive upside that he definitely has. And then another player who's really interesting, and I'm curious if somebody will take a flyer on, and that is Brock Such. So the thing with Brock Such is he's a 19-year-old forward in the Western Hockey League, and typically 19-year-old forwards don't really get selected. It's very rare, but this was a player that played in the BCHL for a number of seasons. The Cougars signed him this past year, gave him an opportunity. He's been their number 1 center this year, playing along Washington Capitals first round pick Tarek Parasak. They've had some great chemistry, and the stats don't lie when it comes to Brock Such's numbers in his first year in the Western Hockey League. 28 goals, 45 assists. He's above a point per game. Very skilled, excellent shot. But the problem is you just never know when it comes to a 19-year-old playing in the Western Hockey League. Sometimes they get picked, sometimes they don't. They've had opportunities to get picked before, and they haven't. So this is an interesting one, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody took him in a later round, but I would be surprised too. Whether he gets picked or not, I think that'll be interesting. Like, this is the type of guy, if he doesn't go NCAA route next season, if he comes back to the Western Hockey League as a 20-year-old, this is the type of player that could potentially put up even higher numbers than he has this year. So it's a really interesting one. Again, we could talk about the 19-year-olds, undrafted 19-year-olds for a long time when it comes to the NHL draft, because sometimes there's great 19-year-olds that's, just kind of are late bloomers in the Western Hockey League that were eligible at 17 and 18 and they just didn't produce. And then all of a sudden they just explode at 19. Whereas Such, obviously this is just his first year in the Western Hockey League, and his offensive numbers don't lie. So it'll be interesting to see come the later rounds of the draft if somebody ends up deciding to take a flyer on Brock Such.
Yeah, and if you look at it right here, I just posted the Canucks draft picks. We've got 3 picks in the 6th round. Why wouldn't you just take a flyer on a guy like this who could potentially have some real upside there? I know the 5'11", 168, but at the end of the day, some guys blossom later on. I mean, you think about Alex Burrows, he he just sits there and goes, I think he started skating when he was 14. You know what I mean? So why wouldn't you think about taking a flyer on a guy who's on a good team and playing quite well? He's very balanced, as you can see here. And it's a project. And really, if he hits, great. If he doesn't, I mean, not many 6th-round picks hit.
Well, and the other thing I'll say with Brock too is, I do think, the talent has always been there for sure. I always think about, and I've talked about it with a few of my close pals here in Prince George, is how Brock Such would be as a player and how he would have performed as both an 18-year-old and a potential 17-year-old in the Western Hockey League, because he did start in the BCHL. And I think at the time, obviously, prior to the rule change, players had a big decision to make when it comes to whether going major junior or going, the BCHL route, the junior A route, because if they felt like they wanted to go that NCAA route, they had to play in the BCHL. They had to play junior A across Canada. Whereas obviously you would lose that if you played in the Western Hockey League. So Brock ends up going to the BCHL. The rules change. And now you have an opportunity to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to lose my NCAA eligibility now. I can go and play in the major junior league in Canada and see how I can perform and play at the highest level. Like, the way the rule used to be, it was always an extremely tough decision for players, and especially a player like Brock, who is not the biggest, because for the longest time, the Western Hockey League was the land of the giants. And it was very difficult for players who are under 6 feet, really, to produce and have success in the Western Hockey League.
Yeah. And I've watched a lot of BCHL hockey games. I used to live in the Okanagan. I lived in Vernon, watching the Vernon Vipers, which are the most successful team in the entire nation there. And then Penticton has kind of become that team that was dominant as well. That Okanagan area was the place that you wanted to watch hockey because you had West Kelowna that won a cup. And I mean, we're talking a national cup, not just the BC Cup. We're talking Penticton's won. We're talking Vernon's won. I think maybe Salmon Arm's the only one that hasn't, but they always had great coaching. They're always solid guys. And the big difference between those two leagues was the one you were talking about, the land of the giants. And a lot of people went the CHL route because it was kind of the clearer path to the NHL. Yeah. But then a lot of guys are like, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. And they called it smart hockey, this junior league, because you could go and do schooling and do all this stuff. So there was a real big discrepancy between the two leagues. But now, I mean, you're going to see a lot of talent on both sides. And now the NCAA has now blossomed and been a part of this. And I think it's going to affect everyone. But anyways, that's another story for another day. The point being, you're right. So a guy like Brock is sitting there and he goes and he plays for the Brooks Bandits and the Okotoks Oilers, and then goes to play with Prince George, and he's had a lot of success. So I'm going to be watching out what happens to him this year. And I do appreciate you throwing these names out there, because a lot of people don't really know. They don't watch enough. They don't do enough research. And that's why we get the views, because people want to hear what we know and some of the extra time we've wasted doing that. I mean, you don't waste your time doing it, but I'm just saying, I'm diving in doing.
You don't waste your time either, Trev. You don't waste your time. Come on.
I call this whole channel time well wasted. No, I'm joking.
Put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I am thinking about making t-shirts. So I should do that. Time well wasted. Kempner Canucks. That's a good one. Okay. All right, let's keep going, because I know there's lots to talk about. But now, if we switch gears to our Vancouver Canucks, what do you think are the biggest needs of the Canucks during this rebuild? I know that there's a lot of talk about, we're going to tear it down to the studs. The management has never said that. And now they're starting to say, okay, now it's going to be a 5-year. The owner said it was going to be 5-year. That's the first time we've heard that. But we still have some large contracts. It's kind of just, and maybe how I want to set this up is this way. We walked into this season literally planning to make the playoffs and have switched gears so quickly and traded our superstar player, the best defenseman of all time on the Canucks roster. Yep. And now we're going rebuild. And I don't think you can move off those contracts fast enough. And I don't even know if you can, because of the no trade clauses. No movement clauses. So what do you think the biggest needs are for the Canucks during this
Oh boy. Where do I want to go? Where do I want to go with this one? Well, I would say, like, organizationally, I think the biggest need for this hockey club is they need more skill. Like, offensively, their forwards, like, you know, I watched them now, and even at the beginning of the season with Quinn Hughes and everybody healthy for the 4 or 5 games that everybody was healthy. And, you know, quite frankly, I kept asking myself where the goals were going to come from. There's just not enough skill, to be honest. It's very, like, I love Brock Besser. I think he's the type of player that I personally would love to, I think they should keep. He's wanted to be in Vancouver all along. I think he's the type of player you keep. But he's not the type of player that's going to drive a line or anything like that. He's always thrived when he has somebody feeding him the puck and just letting him set up shop in one of the circles and ripping the puck. Perfect. That's fine. He doesn't have to drive a line. And we've seen a bit of, obviously, the bro line's been great the last couple of games. And I think it was funny when you sent me these questions. The first thing I thought of was obviously this team does need speed and skill, but I'll say at least in that Quinn Hughes trade, they did get some back with Rossi and Ogren. I think Ogren, I'm a real big fan on Ogren. I'm high on him. I think he's got, his speed, his aggressiveness. He's got some skill. And I think he fits well on that line with Besser and Rossi, just because, everybody knows Brock's not the fastest. Rossi's not the fastest either, but he's slippery. He gets away from checks and everything. He's got some skill. He's got fast hands, which is great. But Ogren can be the guy that gets hard in on the forecheck, which has been refreshing, I should say. But like, I think when I look at this team, even organizationally, even looking down in Abbotsford, there isn't really, aside from maybe Jonathan Lekkerimäki, there's not really much offensive skill that I'm excited for to potentially get to the NHL level. And I think that's where, hypothetically, if they do project, and, obviously everything right now looks like they will come in 32nd place, that guarantees at least a top 3 pick. And you just hope that they can get one of McKenna or Stenberg, because that's a huge boost to both to the skill part of this organization. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but I think that's something I would like to see them do, especially in this draft, when you kind of even mentioned it in the last question when we were talking about Brock Such. When it comes to those later round picks, I would like them to take bigger swings. And when I say that is, I'd like to see them taking guys that, if they're not the biggest, but they're incredibly talented. And when it comes to their skill and their offensive ability, why not? Take a risk, take a shot, because we've seen time and time again, teams will do that when they have a plethora of picks in the later rounds. Take a guy who has a high ceiling offensively and might need some work when it comes to maybe the defensive side of the game or something like that. I would like them to do that because, quite frankly, look at their organization. Where are the goals coming from in the future? EP40 used to be, but we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it for, 2.5 years. There's been glimpses of it, but right now, I think, especially with this rebuild, you can't bank on that potentially happening again. So for me, I think the big thing is speed and skill. Speed and skill. That's what you need to get in this organization. I think, I've also seen on social media too, like, I think, and to a degree, I do agree, is they need some toughness too. But I think that's a lot easier to potentially go out and acquire than, some really high end skilled forwards producing in your top 6. So I would lean towards speed and skill. And that's what, if I'm the management, that's what I'm prioritizing come draft day.
Yeah, if you look at the current roster right now, I mean, there's lots of holes and there's lots of mediocre guys. Have potential for sure. We're developing the young players, which I'm happy about. Booyam, and then having especially Mancini just got that extra 2-year contract. You've already got DPD. You've already got Verlander. He was supposed to play in the AHL. And he's played all year in the NHL. So that bodes well. But you're right. When it comes to those forward lines, man, it would be nice to have some more scoring depth there. And for example, that whole Stenberg McKenna argument, just getting either one of those guys to play on the wing with Pettersson is going to be helpful. End of story, right? But if you don't get that guy, then it's the other question. And so maybe later in the draft, there are guys that are going to drop just because of different needs that teams need. And there might be some gems sitting there at the end of the first round, early second, that I think that the Canucks can do. Now, a lot of people want the Ruck twins, and I understand why they're saying it. I was watching a Craig Button moment there the other day, and he said he's going to put them in his top 15. So let's kiss that dream goodbye.
I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to say I've seen a lot of people talk about the Ruck twins on social media, and I get it. It would be very exciting. Obviously, there's a history with twins in Vancouver, but it's not happening. It's never been realistic. because I think people have also been sleeping on the Ruck twins. They're both very good. And, you know, at the beginning of the year, a lot of people talked about one being in the late first round, one being in the early second round. But now I think they're both going in the first round. And it would take just somebody would have to pull a Brian Burke, and arguably the best draft day move to acquire them both. And quite frankly, I just don't see anyone doing it. And I'll say this, even though I love the Canucks till I die. But if a team is going to do it, it's not going to be the Canucks. The Calgary Flames are the best position to potentially do it.
Ooh.
I hate saying it, but it's true.
Yeah, you know what? You're right.
I hate saying it, but it's true. They are the best position to potentially do that move, not the Vancouver Canucks. So Canucks Twitter, I love you. I'll support you till I die. But we got to get off that mindset that the Canucks are going to get the Ruck twins, okay?
Yeah, especially with them moving up. Especially with them moving up, right? Yeah. So ours, I don't know where that Minnesota pick's going to land yet. But it's
going to be around 25, 26, right?
Yeah, that's what I think. It's going 25 to 27. Yeah. So the biggest needs are scoring. Well, that just moves to our next question that I want us to talk about is, if you were the Canucks GM, who would you draft if you're talking about those overalls? Depending on if we got the first overall pick, who are you taking? If we didn't get the first and we got the second, who would you take? And who would you take if we got that dreaded third overall pick? I mean,
well, I think the first two I think are easy. You know, for me, I take McKenna 1. Mm-hmm. I think his offensive upside and his offensive potential is too much to not pass up. So I would take him because going back to the last question, I think they need skill, and he is very skilled. Yeah. So I would say McKenna at 1. If they're picking 2, you just take whoever doesn't go 1, right? Because whoever picks 1, they're most likely taking McKenna or Stenberg. So if you're the Canucks, you just take whichever one's left, which is almost probably the better way to do for Canucks Twitter, Canucks social media. Canucks fans can kind of sit easy a little bit if that does come into fruition. Like you mentioned, if they drop to third, that's where it gets spicy and that's where it gets interesting. And I think that's where I think Canucks Twitter is going to be very interesting for May and June. The hot debate and, you know, us as content creators and Canucks media down in the lower mainland, that's where it's going to be a fun 2 months if that comes into fruition. I hope it doesn't. With that being said, if I'm the GM and they get number 3, and I know this kind of contradicts a little bit what I just said in the last answer, but I think you got to take best player available, and you got to take Keaton Verhoeff. I don't know how you pass on a 6'4", 220-pound right shot defenseman who can be your new number 1 potential defenseman. And yes, that's going to create some problems because of how deep now this team is on the blue line. But I think if you try and take a forward at 3, that's a huge reach. That's a huge reach for Tynan Lawrence, Caleb Malhotra. I don't like it. I hate it, quite frankly. Now, if they come third and Stenberg and McKenna go 1-2, you know, maybe you trade back. But I also don't like that idea either. I'd rather take Verhoeff. So I would rather take Verhoeff than trade back because I think he's too good. And I feel like if a team takes Verhoeff and he turns into a number 1 defenseman, that's something us as Canucks fans will have to live with that for 15 years, and that would be terrible, especially considering how crucial this draft is. So I would take Verhoeff and then figure out the problems. Figure it out after the fact what you do with your defensive depth moving forward.
Yeah, this is I'm wondering what the Canucks are going to do. There are so many scenarios.
Like I said, let's just hope it doesn't get to that.
Yeah.
Pick one or two and we're good.
Yeah. I mean,
we're good.
I'm with you. I just think that Reed and Verhoeff are very good. But there's that connection with Manny Malhotra and Caleb Malhotra that I'm just sitting there going, will they do this? And it looks like he's going to go 5 or 6. So that's where I'm sitting going, if they're going to do that, if that's what they're going to do, I would rather them trade back to 4 or 5 and do that than yeah. Anyways, I don't know what you could get.
No, and then you get an asset. And then you potentially get an asset, right? And I'll say this, like, we haven't seen in a very long time teams move up into the top 3. So the question would be, what kind of asset would you get for a team to move up? Say there's a team at 5 or 6 and they want Verhoeff. They, what's the evaluation of moving up 3 spots that high in the first round? I don't know.
Well, I think it is what you just said. It's Verhoeff is the guy that you like. It's because there's a McKenna and a Stenberg.
Yeah.
That as a Verhoeff is moving down when he shouldn't be. He should be a top 2 pick, possibly a number 1 pick overall. So if people value that, they might do it. I got other content I'm going to make on that. I don't want to give away everything I think. Saying that, go for it.
No, the other thing I was just going to mention is, who says it goes McKenna Stenberg? I'm a firm believer that genuinely it depends on what that draft order looks like come May 5th. I think there is also a very strong possibility that, somebody at number 1 could take McKenna and somebody at 2 could take Verhoeff, and then Stenberg sitting there at 3 and you just take him. I think there's a strong possibility that I don't think a lot of people are talking about that could happen.
Yep.
So while it might be discouraging at 3, you also have to keep an eye on who's picking 1 and 2.
Yep.
Because I think there are some teams towards the bottom of the standings that I think they could use a number 1 defenseman.
I agree. I would not be shocked if Verhoeff goes number 2 in the draft. And if he goes number 2 in the draft and we get Stenberg at 3, I think we should have a party in the streets. I'm just saying that right now. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So yeah, 3rd might not be, you and I will both make content about that that thing happens. But I've been laying awake at night thinking about that scenario. I've been on the treadmill thinking about that scenario, going, oh, what if one of those guys drops? And it's like, oh, that would be beautiful. So 3 is not so bad.
It just depends how those lottery balls fall come May 5th.
Yeah, and I believe Draisaitl went 3rd overall.
He did.
So that is, like, people forget that and think, oh, whatever. Also, Caleb Malhotra reminds me a lot of Jerome McGinley, and I don't know if it's just they kind of look similar, but I just watched their play style, and I'm like, yeah, but the difference is he's a center over a right winger. Like, I don't know. You start thinking about those kind of things, but I don't think Tynan Lawrence is a guy that you're going to be picking at 3. That's terrible strategy. Bjork, I really like him, but his size is a little too small for me. I wouldn't pick him at 3 there. There's a lot there, but yeah, anyways. Oh, man, I could talk with you all day about this kind of stuff.
Me too, brother.
So much fun. I don't want to waste your whole day chatting about this stuff, but man, it's been so nice having you on. And thank you for your perspective. I really do want to thank you for all the content you make. I watch a majority of it. Mostly when I'm uploading my stuff, your stuff comes up. No, I'm trying. I'm just kidding. I watch a ton of your content and really enjoy what you do. Thank you so much for being a part of this community and for all the hard work. I know that it's a lot of work, but I know it's a passion that we have. So appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. And likewise, I watch all your content as well. It's so, like I said it at the beginning of the interview, and I'll say it again, but like there's so many good Canucks content creators, I think, too, with such different backgrounds. And that's what's fun, I think, about content creation is everybody has a kind of a little bit of a different walk of life. And when it comes to content creation, and that's what makes, I think, the Canucks scene so fun because everybody has a little bit of a different perspective and it makes it so enticing when it comes to watching. So thank you so much, RevTrev, for having me on. I was so flattered when I got the invite. So thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. Look forward to watching the rest of your content this season. And hopefully we can do this again.
Absolutely. Do you have time for 2 minutes of questions?
Sure.
Okay. So Jack comes in and says, who are some good fits for the Canucks with that wild pick? I've already made a video about that. So go and check that out. But I think the question I would like you to answer, Jeremy, is this one. What about Daxon Rudolph?
Ooh.
What are your thoughts on him? He's getting a lot of hype right now.
That's the thing. This first round is so deep at defense. I quite frankly, I love Daxon Rudolph as a prospect. I also think he's going to be a top 10 pick. I think he's going to kind of be in that 7 to 10 range. But what I think with Daxon Rudolph that's going to help him a lot is he's playing on a Prince Albert team that is very good. I'm going to make a video on this. It's kind of a little bit different than my obviously Canucks content, but I'm going to make I do it every year, my WHL playoff predictions. But spoiler, I think the Prince Albert Raiders are winning the Western Hockey League this year. And I think Daxon Rudolph's going to be a big part of it. And if PA wins, they go to the Mem Cup. That's going to do wonders for his draft stock. And as a result, maybe that bumps him up even higher in the draft. But I think he's a prospect that, quite frankly, I look at him, I think he's a top 10 pick.
Yeah. I mean, you look at this, you look at the Eastern Conference of this, Prince Albert Raiders are stacked. Medicine Hat Tigers are stacked. I mean, the Edmonton Oil Kings are right there too. That's going to be a bloodbath there. And then whatever happens in the Western Conference, it's going to be interesting. So I'm in again. I think we're all going to be watching this kind of content, like this kind of like what's going to happen in this league when you have teams that have only 10 losses, only 8 losses. You know, maybe 15 losses or less. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, that's insane. So, but that doesn't, I mean, it takes, you get the wrong matchup, right? You get the wrong matchup.
Oh, yeah.
And here we go. And next thing you know, you got to win 4 games. You got to win first to 4.
Yeah.
Right?
And you run into a hot goalie, you're in trouble. I think one thing I just want to say too, is like with the Western Hockey League and just major junior hockey in general, it's so refreshing to see, for the longest time. I remember growing up seeing, remember the Vancouver Giants of the early 2000s when they won the Western Hockey League, and the next year they hosted the Mem Cup. But you see players or you see teams that are in contendership when it comes to major junior, and more times than not, they're older teams. They have a lot of 19-year-olds. Obviously, they have their 3 20-year-olds. But you look at those top teams right now in the Western Hockey League, and let's talk about the Prince Albert Raiders. Who's one of their best players? Daxon Rudolph, a draft-eligible player. Medicine Hat Tigers. You have the Ruck Twins. Let's talk about the Everett Silvertips. They have Landon DuPont. Like, they have the Prince George Cougars have Carels. Like, you're seeing these younger players now coming into the Western Hockey League and across major junior that are actually making such a huge impact at such a young age. And quite frankly, it's so refreshing because for the longest time, 20 some years ago, it really was the older teams were just, okay, that team's got 10, 19-year-olds, 3 20s, and the rest are 18-year-olds. So they're going to probably have a pretty good season. But now you have to look past that a little bit. And quite frankly, I think it just makes for better hockey. And it makes it a lot of fun, especially come playoff time. And for us as Canucks fans who have to watch, for the draft.
Yeah, and that's a great comment. Last question is it, and Jack says, if we pick third and Stenberg and McKenna off the board, and then we pick either Reed or Verhoeff, which are right-handed shot defensemen, do we trade Hronek and get what he would consider getting a big haul for Hronek? What's your thoughts on that? I've got a little bit of thoughts as well, but I'd love to hear yours first.
I love Philip Hronek. I think if you end up with Verhoeff, I think you definitely probably look into doing that. With that being said, this management had a tendency to hand out a lot of no trade clauses and a lot of no movement clauses. So even if that is something that management would like to do, at the end of the day, it is also up to Phil. So I think that's going to make it a little challenging. With that being said, I think there would be a lot of teams that would want Phil Hronek in his services because he's a very talented, very good defenseman. So if you end up with Verhoeff, that is something that I think the Canucks would look at. But at the end of the day, I also don't think it's entirely up to management. It's also up to Phil.
Yeah. The other thing that I don't think people are considering enough is the age of the players that they're drafting.
Yeah.
So Verhoeff and Reed, I believe, are both 17. Yeah. Carels is 17 as well. They might not be playing in the NHL next season. So moving on from a Hronek, maybe it doesn't even have to happen this year. It can happen next year. Correct. And you still can get a good haul. Because usually it's the top few guys that actually make the NHL the next season, but very few. And then it's a 2 to 3 year process before you actually see them in the lineup playing pretty significant role.
Yeah, I think with Verhoeff too, you have to remember it's obviously he's 17. It's his draft eligible year, but he made the jump from the Western League to NCAA this year, which is crazy because that's a big jump. First and foremost, to make the jump to the Western League is a big jump. Then to go from the WHL to NCAA is a big jump. If they picked, hypothetically, if Canucks get third overall pick and they pick Verhoeff, I think there's a real chance he's back playing NCAA next year, and you're fine because then you can keep Philip Hronek for next year, and you don't have to worry about it for a year or two. Like, that's not something that, okay, you draft Verhoeff, you have to trade Phil right away. Like, that probably comes a year or two down the road, and by then, Phil's probably 30 years old, and maybe by then he's like, you know what? I'll take a change of scenery to compete for a Stanley Cup, even though you guys might be on the up. I'll look at that then.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Japan's in the building. Good to see you, my friend. If we get third pick, would you trade the third or drop in culture? We've already talked about that at length. The short answer is, the Canucks might. We wouldn't, but I mean, it all depends on who's there, and you should just scroll back and watch that. That's actually a really good part of the show today. So we'll talk about that later. So, okay, we're going to end it here. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here. Keep up.
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. And everyone, just a reminder, I'm literally going live again today. I'm doing 2 streams today. So we're going to be diving in to this awesome game that's coming up. The barn burner of the St. Louis Blues. It starts at 4:00. Actually, it started right now. They're singing the national anthem. So
take your hat off.
6:40. So I'm going to go 6:45 doing a live post-game show. So make sure you come out there. I appreciate the support and the love. Now, I don't know how I got that. Oh, there. That's how I turned that off. So we're gonna call it a day. Everyone hit the like and subscribe, but more importantly, go support Jeremy, and it's going to be great. So thanks so much. Go Canucks, go. I don't know.
Thanks,
Any last words?
Go Canucks, go. Taking care of business every day, baby.
I love it.